Hello, everyone, and welcome to the K-1 Pass-Through Entity Series. I'm Dave Stauffacher, a senior credit trainer with Lenders Online Training, where we help lending and credit professionals say yes to good loans. My colleague and fellow senior credit trainer is Joe Davis, and he is joining us today. It's great to have you, Joe.
Great to be here, David. Thank you very much.
As you know, we get lots of questions specifically on this pass-through entities and the challenges, the misunderstandings, and how, due diligence can be done when you're underwriting them. So today's question, kind of a deep thought, I think. The question is, in case of a pass-through entity owned by a guarantor, but the entity itself is not obligated on our loan. So I'm kind of wondering, what sort of financial reporting should lenders be requesting? How much depth should we get into? What will justify just a K-1 versus obtaining the full tax returns? Joe, any thoughts?
Yeah, great topics, David. I would start with our standard disclaimers, right? Number one, it depends. Number two, check your guidelines. Now that those are out of the way. No, I kid. But no guideline will ever cover every single scenario, right? So these often come down to judgment calls. But when I say it depends, consider a few things. One, how significant is that entity? So the pass-through entity, how significant is that entity to the guarantor's cash flow? Also, how much weight are you placing on that secondary source of repayment? If the entity is significant to the overall financial picture and you're placing some weight on that, obtaining full tax returns and doing some analysis on those rather than just relying on the K-1, that probably makes some sense, right? Number two, also, what percentage of that entity does the guarantor own? Are they a passive or non-passive owner? If they own just a small portion and they're not really involved in the day-to-day running of the company, summary info, maybe just the K-1, that's probably adequate in that scenario. Next, I would say, is the entity showing losses or inconsistent profitability? You can see that on the K-1, right? If you're just getting that, or on Schedule E, if you're just getting that, you can kind of see if they're losing money or maybe that's kind of all over the place. You can see those schedules, and that should get you thinking a little bit. That can give you a good gauge on if you want to dig deeper. The risk is that your personal guarantor might have to prop up an unprofitable entity, right? Maybe it's a startup, maybe they're just not making it. That's the risk. This is particularly a concern if the individual guarantees the debt of that pass-through entity. Recall or understand that they could be on the hook for the debt of that entity. So you want to take a look at that in that scenario. But David, what are some other thoughts on this topic?
Great points with that. I was, when I was doing a lot of underwriting, I kind of tried to get all the tax returns. I don't know. I was just, maybe I'm just kind of I like to grab as much information as possible because I just want to understand what's going on with those other entities. Now, the pushback is, am I asking a client for more information and upsetting that relationship, saying, why do I need to give that to you? Because that business has no connectivity to what I'm borrowing the money from. So I don't want to upset the client, but if I can, I like that information. It tells me a lot more that's going on rather than the K-1. But a few points that stand out. I definitely would want the full tax return if I have a sense that I can see intercompany transactions. There's something going on between the entity and the borrowing entity, right? There's something going on. I want to know what's going on. It could be receivables, could be payables, could be loans in general. So that tells me if there's intertwined, regardless if there's a guarantor relationship obligation, I got to know what's going on. Somehow there's a paper trail. And if they're not obligated, then there could be a situation where I've seen this, where sometimes there's collateral that's associated with the other property that somehow we encumbered, but they're not really guaranteed. Now, that's a little question how that was done, but in the last 5 years, that's come across 3 different situations where they took some real estate that was also tied with something else over there. So if there is, I want to understand that. I think you mentioned about loan sizes. If it is a large loan size, I kind of want to know the relationship of everything, because that could be a house of cards. We got to understand what we're involved with. And whether we chose to ask for the other entity to guarantee or not, don't know. But the size does impede that. And I want to know what's going on in that world, what their cash flow is, what their sustainability is. I think it's important. Lastly, I think you made a mention on this first was I need to understand the financial strength of the borrower. If I'm lending to the entity first, that's important, right? Does it stand alone? Do I have the owner tied in as a personal guarantor? Great. But that personal guarantor has some other interest, but my focus is on the entity at first. If it's not strong enough or there is some questions, is the guarantor the key in this, right? Am I relying on that guarantor to make this work? If it is, then I really got to understand everything that's coming into that guarantor's world, because if he does have outside interests, is there income coming in there? I want to understand it. Maybe he's guaranteeing that relationship too. And I want to make sure how we all fit in this. So do I like to get as much information as possible? I do. I don't think getting a K-1 by itself, I think I'm missing something on there. And I think the ask still could be there without upsetting the relationship. Any final thoughts, Joe?
Yeah, agree with what you said. I mean, ideally, we would have full information to understand the global, and as I always called it, the empire. That kind of that level beyond the global. Ideally, you would have that, but it often comes down to judgment calls. But I would say if you find yourself kind of on the fence and you don't know if you should get it, I would say err on the side of caution. And what I mean by that is get the financial information. Obtain that full tax return, obtain the debt schedule, understand exactly what's going on with that entity, so that you have a really firm grasp on that. So some bankers and maybe some customers might bristle at that a little bit, but understand they're wanting to borrow some money from your organization, sometimes a significant amount of money. So personally, I think, sending over a few more PDFs via email is not a big ask in that scenario.
Definitely. Great points. And like I said, what's the worst that can happen? They can say no, and then we have to deal with the discussion. But your point was saying they're borrowing money, probably lots of money, and it seems just reasonable to ask for that financial information. Yeah. Great points. So there you have it. Kind of a little bit of a deeper discussion, a little bit on collateralization, what we would expect deeper into underwriting in case your your entity is owned or is guarantor, but the guarantor actually owns something else. What do we want to ask for? I like to say err on caution, just be prudent, ask for the information. I think it's best. So Joe, we really enjoy these opportunities to have some in-depth conversations regarding specific underwriting questions. Yes, we're seasoned lenders. We've been doing this for a long time and we work on that, but I think all questions are well received. So I look forward to get more of them. Now, many of you know we do foundational training for senior credit officers, junior credit officers, their credit analyst teams. We want to help you understand the K-1 relationships from each entity that we deal with, how to deal with them globally. That's what we do in helping your credit team to get as strong and feel confidence in what they do. So if you're interested, reach out to us at lendersonlinetraining.com/talk. We'd love to be able to chat, tell you what we do, show you what we do. The other thing is we appreciate your comments and questions. Feel free to ask us those questions at experts@lendersonlinetraining.com. Quite honestly, come to lendersonlinetraining.com. Check out our blogs. We have a lot of blogs. We have some of our live streams on there. Great dripping of information. Feel free to reach for us. As always, thank you again for coming. We look forward to talking to you next week. Until next time, have a great day, everybody. Bye now.
Thanks, everyone.